Welcome back to this month's edition of CAP STRAT Wealth. Welcome back, Molly.
Thank you, Neil.
Nice to have you. A couple updates that we're going to share before we jump into our main topic. October 15th deadline is looming here, so we'll touch on that briefly. And then we'll spend most of our time on discussion around why most Americans do not have an estate plan. I wouldn't say that's the case for our client base here today, but it is a high priority in our view to make sure you have the proper documents in place. But the statistics are staggering high relative to how many that don't. So we're going to spend a little time on that today. So why don't we kick it off with the October 15th deadline? I'll let you take it.
Two important things to really keep in mind. If you filed an extension for your personal return for 2022, certainly if you have any tax payments as you work closely with your accountant, please let us know. We want to make sure that we have adequate funds available for this time. On a separate note, if you made an IRA or a Roth IRA contribution that is really disallowed and your accountant would have brought this to your attention, you have until October 15th to actually reverse this. So great example would be you made a Roth IRA contribution directly to that Roth, but it was disallowed based on how much money you made last year. So you have until October 15th, if you're one of those extended filers, to reverse the contribution.
Some quick updates there, and obviously after October 15th, we are still collecting tax returns, so if you are on extension, please send those our way, as that will be helpful for our year-end planning process. All right, let's jump into the main topic here today. I already mentioned that 67% of Americans don't have an estate plan, and we feel that that number is way too high. I would say that's not the percentage of the clients we work with, as this is an important topic, but we did want to dig into kind of the, not necessarily the psychology, but also kind of like what we're seeing and some of the roadblocks that prevent people from wanting or to obtaining or finalizing that estate plan there. Okay. Before we jump into that, though, why don't we just kick it off high level of what is a proper estate plan?
Yeah, so if you draft estate documents, you're typically going to see a power of attorney, both from a healthcare perspective and property perspective, a living will and a last testament, as well as a revocable living trust. And this really can depend on the amount of assets you have. But any estate attorney would really work closely with you to determine what documents would be best for you. So really the importance of these documents is to ensure that both if you're incapacitated and at your passing, that your wishes are ultimately followed, that your assets are distributed in the manner that you want.
Yep.
It also ensures that any of your healthcare needs or final wishes are executed. There's a lot of things that can happen, and really giving clarity will really ensure that your family has peace of mind as they navigate the journey of your passing.
Yeah. So let's jump into, I guess, what we see are some of the reasons like why people don't have an estate plan or they haven't finalized those documents. What do you think the number one reason is that you see?
I think the number one reason is just people facing mortality. I mean, let's face it, the conversation around death is very uncomfortable, and people don't really like to think about when they ultimately will pass, but certainly two things are for certain: death and taxes. So while it's uncomfortable, we really encourage that not be a roadblock, because it can create so much clarity for a family if you move forward with that.
Yeah, I think another big reason is procrastination. Obviously, everyone's lives are busy, no matter what stage of life they're in, whether they have young kids, middle age, or even retirement itself. There's always something going on. And I think it ties also back to the uncomfortable part of that discussion and really laying that out. But those are things that procrastination can cost you a lot of money longer term, because as we all know, we don't know when we are going to go. And being prepared is part of that process. What do you think about when you hear estate plan? It sounds very complex. And how do we tie that to kind of like lack of knowledge or lack of understanding to get that done?
Yeah, well, I mean, like we said, there's a few documents to put in place, and really they're not super complicated. It's just working with the right tool or person to get those in place. Because if you write down your wishes on a sheet of paper, that really doesn't cut it.
Right.
It's not notarized. It's not validated in a legal manner. So those are things that, well, it's a little more complex than that, certainly. You need to take the right steps with the right person alongside you.
Yeah, and that's we've seen that before, and that's where we quickly want to act. And if there's, to your point, around a big trip coming up, or something that's triggering the event from an illness standpoint, you want to make sure you have that properly documented. But to Molly's point, it doesn't have to be overly complicated. We certainly have seen a lot of estate plans that are super complicated, but as you're just going down the path of getting these documents set up, there's a very efficient route to go, and it won't take that long there. Okay. Let's talk about family dynamics.
Yeah, there's a lot that can happen there. As you think about all the events within your life that are happening, whether it be birth of children, marriage, divorce, family passing, there's a lot that can happen. And also even naming the right person within the scope of those documents can sometimes bring up family tension. You don't want to name the wrong person, but if you don't name the right person or a person, that inaction is certainly a problem.
Right, which can cause basically fear of making a decision.
Right.
Which, again, by not making a decision can be super costly.
So Neil, I think another hang up a lot of people have is cost.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I definitely think it's a barrier and a reason why people don't have an estate plan. When you think about the cost perspective of a plan, there's a pretty wide range of that. It can range, say, from $500 up to maybe $6,000, depending on the scope of services you're using, whether you're using online or an estate, like an individual estate planner, even the type of firm that you're using. If you're using a big firm versus a smaller firm, that can range depending on that. But from our perspective, that's a smaller investment versus what it can cost you if you don't have a plan or the proper documents in place. Because by not having a plan, you can pay not only higher attorney fees, once you do pass, and two, it also can apply other estate taxes from a federal or potentially state estate tax. But then the last piece of that is just the burden that's put on your family.
That's a great point. If you think about the burden of a sudden passing, the last thing you want is to have your family have to deal with all the pieces of your estate that aren't really clearly outlined.
Right. So as we wrap up today's session, keep in mind of that October 15th deadline. Obviously, once their taxes are done, if you filed for an extension, we'd like to see a copy of that for our year-end planning meetings. But also, if you don't have an estate plan, give us a call. We can start to engage in those conversations of what might be not only a roadblock for you to get this done, or to at least provide some best practices, ideas we've seen in the past, and certainly make sure that you're going down the right path for your needs based on the wealth that you have today. And then finally, if you already have an estate plan in place, remember that 5 to 7 year rule. If it's been beyond that time, now is a good opportunity to refresh that, or at least make sure the people you have named in there are who you want to have relative to your own personal wishes. So thank you, and we'll see you next month. Bye-bye.